All right, welcome back to another episode of Dynamic Journeys. I've made a few other videos doing some other trips and stuff through the Verde Valley and into the Flagstaff region, and I noticed that most of the attention is still on the 4Runner. And so I'd love to go through a new walk-around video of all these new additions and lights that I've had put up. I got 5 new lights on the front end, a couple extra new boundary lights on the sides, and a couple new boundary lights on the back end. So I want to go into detail on like why I did everything I did, as well as going into my opinion on why I believe that I got my best bang for my buck while still spending a decent amount of money, just because you really do pay for what you get, but also realizing that in today's day and age there's so much competition, you don't have to spend $400 to $500 per pod to get good light output. So I really want to kind of focus mostly on the Procomp pods. I have been obsessed with lighting probably since I was like maybe 13, 14 years old, honestly. And growing up in the darkness of Alaska, it just kind of made sense at that point, having good lighting in the wintertime. And now that I live in Arizona here, it's not as dark as long, but the darkness here is much, much darker. And so we're filming this here up looking out through the snowy mountains in the distance and the Sedona or Mogollon Rim region here, because this place is a dark sky community and it is pitch beyond dark out here, blackness. And so the stars are great. But when it comes to driving at night, especially on a mountain road like we are here, this whole area is just beyond dark. And wherever the light beam ends, it's a black hole. And so basically having every single spectrum of light color-wise that you need to utilize to get through the dirt and the dust and everything is perfect. So I got 2 colors of amber and then white as well. And then also all the different lens patterns between wide beam, spot, combo, and just knowing what to use and when to use it. So I want to go over all these little things in the video. But basically, I had been doing research for a couple years before going and spending a bunch of money. I had that like Amazon light bar that was on the front end here for almost 4 years, honestly, and it did decent. It was 10,000 lumens, not bad. And I had some like little light bar or little light pods at the bottom, also Amazon. They did pretty good, but just got to the edge and the end of like what I kind of wanted for distance, going faster with the good suspension in the dirt and in the dark, as well as just, me having that personal obsession with lighting. And so watching Headlight Revolution, another YouTube video, another YouTube channel, they have all these different competitions, all these different comparisons, and they showcase mostly Morimoto products. And honestly, I have half of our lights here with Morimoto, at least the smaller lights, and they're worth it. But honestly, you don't always need all that light. And so I wanted to be able to focus on some of the other brands that aren't, up there in the top tier list with Baja Designs and Diode Dynamics and KC Lights and all those, top tier brands and stuff like that, plus the other ones that you don't really hear about as often. And so I want to show how Procomp is really just kind of, just as good. But according to Headlight Revolution, it literally tested higher than the Baja Designs LP6. And it's just, that's a 6-inch light versus a 7-inch light. So Headlight Revolutions came out with a comparison video that said basically that this light was brighter according to their own tests with their own meters and doing all of their own evaluations, but being fair and as well as unbiased with it all, and just putting all the top tier lights plus the name brand lights that aren't really that great like Nightlight and stuff like that. And honestly, KC Lights was incredibly underwhelming. Even just like looking at just still images of the actual light output, it's pathetic that they're even a top tier bright light brand and they just suck, honestly. So Procomp beat everything. It basically tested at like 239,000 candela, and the LP6 combo white from Baja Designs, $470 something per pod. These are $270 per pod. You're literally saving 50% of that price, and it was brighter than that. And it has a lifetime warranty. I mean, it's just like a no-brainer. But at the end of the results, they had a chart of everything with listed, listed outputs and everything, and it just wasn't a part of the chart, even though it was within all their competition, comparison videos, I mean. So I'd like to actually put that in. I'll have a little segment of that in this video here. Here you can see how the Vision X is like just a spot beam. Here you go. You got some actual flood on the Procom plus a spot heavy in the middle. Back to spot, which is like a weak flood. Nice flood and also nice beam pattern. Down low, we got the Diode Dynamic SS5 pods here. And this is a 90 watt pod and this is a 96 watt pod. This is 5 inches and this is 7 inches here. So you'd expect it, at least with power wise, to be somewhat similar, but just having a physically way larger light pod here puts out just a significant more amount of light. So like they advertise Procomp 11,800 lumens, and then when Headlight Revolution did their test, they did it all in candela, but it does actually convert to somewhat close to their advertised amounts. Now, when it comes to Baja Designs, it was also really accurate with what their advertised versus realistic actual light output is. And so the main difference is almost 12,000 lumens versus 8,000 lumens, and almost, you know, the same power consumption, 90 versus 96 watts. And so obviously you get more chips and more LEDs in this bigger pod here, but the amount of power consumption, you know, that's the real kicker here, honestly, is like, are you going to try to burn 3,000 watts of power and only have the same amount of lights as somebody using less power altogether and having more light, or vice versa of that? So that was kind of like, you know, my personal beef on that, is wanting to have things in the right place in the right time. So instead of doing the full, you know, Morimoto Big Banger, which is a brighter light, but you do almost pay $500 per pod, and so, you know, sacrificing a little bit of light output for a little bit of money, and also going with a dedicated amber specifically for snow and dust and just like, you know, actually being in the sand dunes and everything. I wanted a really bright pod, but knowing that they weren't as bright as something else I could get, and also saving some money, that's the reason why I went with this setup. These are all and only sold in combo, which is probably how Procomp is able to save some money. They sell it only in white, no other power options, no backlight, and only in combo. But lifetime warranty, and it actually performs, and it's been sitting here buzzing and vibrating on the front end for a couple months now, and so nothing's fallen apart. Honestly, it's just an awesome thing altogether. And these lights down here have an 8-year warranty, and together as a pair, they're $700 for a pair of pods. And so for a pair of these here, you're still spending less than that, way more light output. But they didn't make amber, they don't make replaceable lenses, and they only have combo. So basically kind of picking your battles here is what I went with this. And you know, your combo beam and your white should be right here. Shouldn't be up top. You know, that flood is unnecessary, and it shouldn't be any lower. And if you're going to use white light, you know, still put it up at the front, so that way you can focus most of it up and out rather than being blinded by a roof light bar, unless you're using a spot beam. That's, in my opinion, the only time you should ever have a light bar on the roof, is if it's a spot beam. And, you know, color doesn't really matter a whole lot, but, you know, if you're going with spot, you're going to want to go with distance anyway. So just go with the spot white bar. That's the best way to do it, in my opinion. And so, not there yet. Honestly, it's not really needed, to be honest. This is like way more than enough. This light, these lights, and the headlights all combined is like 55,000 lumens, and including the pod wide beams down here. And so it is just an incredible amount of light. But basically, 96 watts versus 90 watts. There's a lot of power being burned up here now, but, you know, alternators next down the road here. Okay, so enough of the front end here. This is actually where like all the addition mostly is, all the money, all the effort, and all the planning and all that. Also, last thing to mention too is I have 2 different beam patterns, a combo beam in this pod and a wide beam pattern in the other pod. And unfortunately, the combo beam isn't as bright in any way, shape, or form as the wide beam. So I'm just going to swap that out. I did buy a spot as well, just testing things. Luckily, Diode Dynamics allows you to return things with no shelving cost or restocking fee or anything like that. But I'm going to test out a spot and another wide and see how it goes. But testing them individually, the wide beam has a further light actual punch, a further spread, better pattern. It's just, honestly, the combo is weirdly useless for these pods specifically. And if you're going to spend $700, you know, and then not like it later on down the road, then that means you're going to have to buy new lenses, and they're like 30 bucks a lens. So just kind of think that through, and also, you know, learn from me. But coming around the side here, these lights were already in order like this. I had a ditch light and I had wide cornering lights already here. This one hasn't changed other than a yellow lens being placed over it. This is the Diode Dynamic Pro SS3 Pros here in the wide beam pattern. This actually helps to fill in my high beams while cornering here, as well as helping to assist even the actual front combo light cannons there. The ditch lights have changed from a Diode Dynamic SSC2 Pro pod to the Morimoto 2-banger HXP, which is like their Pro version. 24 watts versus 26 watts, and it puts out significantly more light. It's incredible, and it uses like an amp less. It's like 1 amp versus, or it's like 1.7 amps versus like something like 2.5 amps. So it's not a whole amp, but it's close to it. And so these are in the combo beam, similar to the other lights that were here. Not even similar, they actually were a combo beam. The light pattern, the light spread is a little different from one brand to the next. And this has got a much more focused, it's an actual spot beam portion of it. And it's focused in a weird way where, or a different way, I should say, where instead of it just flooding out right away, it doesn't flood out until you're about like 20, 30 feet out. And that's just perfect because honestly, I don't really need to see the light down right below here. I have rock lights now. This is just helping to get out on the ditches, doing 90-degree corners off the road. And, you know, if I'm in an environment where, like, you know, we're on a mountain pass and I'm doing corners down into a ditch, then I'll just come out and bump them down. I can, like, if I'm, you know, forcing it hard enough, I can get them to actually turn downwards a little bit. You know, aiming them might change a little bit depending on what I'm doing. But basically, these are honestly, an awesome upgrade for it. So, Black Friday deal stuff. So coming around the side here, instead of having those two 6-inch LED bars that were on each side, which I had forever, and they were cheap, and I just wanted to reuse them after buying this 4Runner here. I never really liked them, but they put the light out, and it was somewhat useful, and they used a lot of power with very little light. And so anyway, things have changed, and my needs and demands have changed. I don't really need like a white light or combo anymore. I have now rock lights, which, you know, I have some video for that as well, and they're pretty bright, and they're a perfect flood. And so just right under the ground, right on the ground is perfect at this point. So really what I wanted was more of a flood off to the distance, so that way I could just kind of look out the window or over my shoulder and just see, you know, no more than 20, 30 feet out. And that's where I reused the Diode Dynamic SSC2 Pro Pod. I just went ahead and I tucked it right up in one of the handholds here instead of buying one of these weirdly specific expensive brackets that these different companies make, like Sherpa makes. I just used an actual bracket from Ace, and I went ahead and, you know, just found a universal bracket. Cut it, drilled the holes a little bigger. And it fits very nice. So I got like a dedicated flood that's yellow and goes the perfect amount of distance, which is only like 30-40 feet for this flood. I was really underwhelmed when I first bought these pods. I bought them with the flood pattern, really didn't like it. Bought it with the combo, it just wasn't really that great, and it's honestly underwhelming. I do not recommend getting the SSC2 pods for anything. Their pros are still not even as bright as the low quality NCS model that Morimoto makes for the two banger. That's all Headlight Revolution. They tested everything. It was just like a really underwhelming light. The only pro to it, literally, is that it has a backlight, and that's it. You know, with Diode Dynamic or with Morimoto, you can replace the lenses too. I guess you get a lens cover and you get a backlight. That's like your only other option. So if you don't need that much light and you want some cool like parking light stuff, then it'll work perfect. And that's exactly what I have planned. I haven't had it wired up yet, but I want to get the actual amber backlight, so that way you get a nice little glow coming out of this for like just a further like parking light kind of look to it. The next thing here is the actual spot beam here. This is the Morimoto one banger, and they only make a high-powered version of it, so they only sell the HXB. It's white, it's a spot beam, and for how small the pod is, it's only 14, 15 watts. The distance that it throws is insane. And so looking right down over here, we're in the mining town of Jerome. So coming up to the edge over here, and you can look down and you can see these evaporation pits down there. And that is probably around, I'd say around 600 feet down below us. And so having it mounted over here on the side of the rack like this, I can just reach out with my arm and just point it down. And I have it tight enough where, and they're lightweight, so they don't move at all for vibration. So I have it just tight enough on the brackets where I can angle it down and look down into the canyon or down into the pit or down into wherever along any mountain pass that we're driving on, or just angle it nice up and flat level. It gets just a couple degrees above level, which is fine. I'm not looking up anything. And I can see basically almost a quarter mile out into each side. And as you get distance, the spot actually starts to widen more. It's a really useful light. Unfortunately, I don't have like an actual like night quality camera, so we'll try to do, have the best scenes possible in the actual GoPro footage here. So basically we got this 25 watt pod here, or 26 watts technically, 15 watt up there, and they're actually wired up to the same switch. So I call it my afterlights, and basically you just get the flood and then you get the spot. Unfortunately, the only real downside with Morimoto, other than like the price, is they don't really have exchangeable lenses for all their pods. not for the single chip ones, like, you know, Morimoto and Diode Dynamics and Baja Designs, they have them to exchange. Not so much with this one, and they don't make a cover either. So I'm gonna probably like figure out a cover and hand make it, or figure something else, or modify something to get it to cover that. It would be nice to not have the spot all the time, but I also didn't want to have too many switches, and having just one little spot beam as its own dedicated light was just not important enough, in my opinion. But coming around the back here, I still have the bumper lights. These haven't changed actually, even though I wasn't afraid of, you know, spending a couple grand here on new lights or just improving things. I still kept the Diode Dynamic SS3 Sport pods. They only pull, I think, something like 15 watts, even though it's a 4 LED pod here versus the actual like single LED pod from Morimoto. They pull the same amount of power, so it just goes to show how much more efficient, how much more energy those small pods pull in all the Morimoto products. But didn't really need the power down low in these lights because it has the spot beam lens, and so essentially you can get like a really cheap pod. Like I think they're like 200 bucks for a pair of them. Get them in the spot and they are phenomenal. 250 yards, I'd say, about to where the road starts to rise up, and we got this perfect level of flood going on each side. Cover that again, cover one of the spots here, just kind of cover both of the spots actually. See what we get just with that. Look at that. These pods are awesome, but then you can see that extra distance there. The spot is just a laser spot. I love it. Diode Dynamic really does have an awesome spot pattern here, super focused. Really bright. I'm sure you could get something a little bit brighter with a little bit more power, a little bit more distance, but it just becomes unusable, especially in the rear bumper here. You can't see that far behind you anyways, especially in the dark. And so this, you'll see in the video, goes at least a half mile in the distance. They're phenomenal. But still had dark spots outside of the mirror. I can only see it straight out the rear view, and with tint there's not much here to see. I do now have a rear view camera set up, and so I can see now a decent bit into the darkness, but it's just a tunnel down the road, nothing off the side. So I now have the Morimoto 2-banger pods. I just loved them so much from using them as my wide angle fog light beams. I bought 2 more pairs for the front corner lights or ditch lights, and then right here for the rear corner lights, and they're wired up to the same circuit, so it's just like full amber behind me, so it's always dusty out. So it's just like the, you know, the optimal light option, you know, unless you're living in a place that never sees dust, honestly. But poor weather, anytime, it's just best to go with amber, honestly. And these are their Pro, or their high-powered HXB version, and they put a lot of power off. And I got them in combo also, so it's just the perfect amount of spot right off the corner, filling in the flood of everything else that, you know, I can see in my mirrors, and it's just the perfect amount. Whatever dark spots there aren't even visible. And, you know, it is looking through a little narrow entrance here, missing the wing and also missing the actual roof rack. So if I were to like mount them on the side or up top or something, I get even better light spread. At the rear mirror, see what I mean by the dark patch? When I'm driving, I mean, my face is really at this level. Like with the camera, I got it up, but I'm really seeing this view. Phenomenal. Before, with just the spots in the rear bumper, you couldn't see that angled light. It was, you know, in the camera mirror here, it was nice, but I just got this at the same time with all the lights. And so looking at the rear view mirror, just with the tint, wasn't quite bright enough unless I rolled down the rear window, which is cool. You can do that in a 4Runner. Basically now, I have like 55 amps of light flowing through everything. So using the aux beam switch panel that I have, it literally gets it right to the limit of the 60 amp breaker for it. But it is cool to have 55,000 lumens just on the front end. And then, you know, a perfect amount of flood on the sides, nice corner lights, perfect spotlights on the side, perfect amount of spot, flood, and combo coming out the rear end. And now I'm just like super satisfied to have like every single element of the light here. So basically, like walking up to the front of the vehicle again here, and kind of get like the look that I've been looking for, specifically with pods, having 3 of them and tucking them right up in the front here. It just gives this awesome desert Baja look to it. And with the Diode Dynamic Pro wide beam or wide cornering lights with the yellow lens on it, it helps to tame down a little bit of, and they are really bright pods. They're very, very bright. So it helps tame down a little bit of it so I can have my front amber here, which is incredibly bright. And then at the same time have my ditch lights fill in that combo, as well as the actual getting that amber color into it. And then at the same time having cornering lights that are able to kind of not overwhelm it with too much white light. It's just dim enough and dull enough to help flood in and fill in everything. So I have video comparisons for all of that stuff. It is a no moon night. It is the darkest night that I've actually done these tests, which I kind of wanted to do it like that on purpose here. Let's take a step back, kind of see the ambiance here. The Diode SSC2 that were the original ditch lights also had a backlight, similar to how the SS3, now they're glowing up here. And honestly, I just thought it was too much, just too many lights. It was starting to look gaudy, honestly. I mean, this is already like that, but I can turn almost all these off here. And this one just running all the time was kind of annoying. You don't get a backlight for the 2 bangers, only their 4 banger and then their big banger and whatnot. I can go with the headlights though. Got the nice glow. Turn the headlights off just to see how bright. I'll turn everything off just to see how bright the rock lights are. Alright. And these actually have a high and low power mode to it, so this is what they say is 1000 lumen, and it's actually showing up on camera for pretty accurate. It reaches out about probably 18-19 feet each side here. A little bit of a glow from the halos helping out. But this is all from that light. Hold on, these were magnetic mounted. Let's pull one off and see what it does out here. Decent floodlight, doesn't go far, but it illuminates really well. Okay. We'll have to walk around the back side. Just because of the bumper blocking things, not as much light is cast out at the back here. Just mounted it in the fender wells like everybody else does, and it's pretty good from the forward and underneath portion here. This is low power, 600 lumens. So this is what I'll be running, and it's wired straight to the battery too. So this is what I plan on running when just parked, setting up camp and stuff like that. And with the red lens on, for summertime, that'll be perfect for bugs. Alrighty, just kind of start turning things on. Sweetie, can you just kind of turn things on going like this? Ignore the fan, and then just go down the line here. Not that one, that one's not empty. From here, here, and then the bottom 4. Put your headlights on too. Ambers now. Ooh, side light. Freaking blinded me. Alright. I'm sure right now the truck's running at like 12.5 volts. Let's take a look. 12.2, shit. We turn them all off. Alrighty. These are just the headlights though. Gotta love these. There's like the B3 by LED that I got through SRQ Fab. Really been happy, honestly, with the headlights. Alrighty, let's go for a drive. Here's the previous setup. Starting off with the Morimoto fog lights wired into the natural fog wiring harness. Then the Amazon light bar, which was 10,000 lumens, but mostly a flood-based combo. Then the combo switch wired up, LED G-pods and dynamic pods here, ditch lights, and the cornering lights. And we're a little bit settled into the road here, so the light's not able to pass too far out of the ditches here, as well as the lens cover being on the wide beam cornering lights here, taking a little bit of that light power up, but right about here you can see just how far off in the corners of the road that light travels out. With a light bar, it wasn't able to fill in everything, so there's quite a few dark spots here, which has been mostly taken care of with the new light setup here. Going back in the dark. In person, it's just as dark. My headlights right now. So the light bar lights is going to be both high beams and auxiliary light. So you can see the ditch lights here are just perfectly filling in. We'll turn the fog lights off. See these. Alright, starting off the light process similar to the one before. Fog lights first, then cornering lights without the yellow lens attached. Three 7-inch Procomp lights, around 36,000 lumens. Got my ditch lights now, Morimoto 2-bangers. This is the aft lights with the Morimoto 1-banger spot beams and the Diode SSC2 Pro flood beam hidden in the handle hold on the roof rack. I personally love the light spread now. It is just perfect. Trying to get a little bit more creative flying the drone this time around, showcasing the light. There's so much more light now anyways, so trying to actually see it like we can in person. Even though this is pretty decent footage in terms of the light exposure, it is much better in person. You can see how far the spot beam is going. That's around, I'd say, 110 yards or so that we can see. Right at this dirt intersection here, will be a better area for you to see the total distance. This is why I want to get the cover for the 1-banger pods, so that way I can just keep things on the same switch and then just pop the cover off whenever I do need that extreme distance out the side. Since they only pull 14 watts, it's not that big a deal leaving them powered up and just leaving them covered. Now I got the rear lights set up, the rear cornering lights, and then rear spot bumper pods. I was having my wife drive while I was flying, so I was trying to multitask in different ways, but now here we go. You can just see how much more light spread there is. It's, in my opinion, the perfect total combined beam pattern. So now I have the front Diode SS5 pods on and turned off the Procomp lights. Almost entirely amber here. Just so bright it floods out. And back to the Procomp lights, which I am now calling my light cannons on the front. From this angle here, you can see how the width of the road and plus an extra amount is completely taken care of in the rear lights. Ditch lights are reaching at least 30 yards further, 40 yards, maybe even 50 yards further than the Diode pods. Lighting is honestly a little more yellow. Even though the lenses are a darker amber color, the actual light color is a little lighter compared to the Diode. With this angle here, you can see just how far the light is able to get down the road. It's been difficult to find perfectly flat ground to be able to showcase the light distance here, but I'm getting as close as I can get with flat ground on this road here. Even though we live in the desert, there's usually vegetation in the way as well. Even with the Procomp lights on, it doesn't completely wash out the amber from the SS5 pods. Here's a great example of just how, in my opinion, the light angles are perfectly pointed. And when it comes to the triangular dark patches, that is not visible from the driver's seat. Alright, from this point you can see reflector down the road, and this was where I was able to at least get a decent amount of forward light as we shut things down. It's about a half mile away where that reflector is. The headlights off, then pods, then cornering lights, even just the fogs on. Now, going into more specifics on power consumption and everything, I'll just kind of name everything, detailing it. You know, each pod here, 96 watts, 90 watts for these guys here. And then the Diode dynamic rock lights, which you can actually see one of them here. They're magnetically mounted and it's awesome. They haven't fallen or anything. They come with different color lenses, red and yellow, which is awesome. So change the lighting setup. It's got a high and low mode. But when it's on high, it pulls something around like 30 watts for all four of them. And then basically you got another 24 watt pod here, another 36 watt pod here. This is 15 watts. This is 26 watts. Underwhelming. I don't know why they pulled that much power, but they didn't want to sell them. Reusing it. And then, since this is also the Pro model for the Morimoto top cornering light here, another 24 watts, and down low saving power at 14 watts. And so basically everything here is pretty much putting it right at the limit. I can have all the lights on all at once, but until I improve my alternator, it's just killing the battery, honestly, as well as other flickering issues. And so inevitably the goal is to have a Baja Designs Onyx 6 light bar, which is like white spot beam, 40-inch, and it's expensive. It's you know, incredibly bright, and the goal is literally to be able to see to the other side of the hills around here. But just getting a literal half-mile spread of light to see the distance way out there. This is one of the very few times having all of that would actually be practical. There's so many overlanders out there that have $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of brand new lighting, whether it's that new brand Nacho or some other brand that, you know, not everybody really kind of talks about, but it's expensive and people buy them anyways, and stuff like that. And so you don't, you know, most of the time, most of those beam patterns, most of the light actual outputs that they have and or placements are just in the poorest places, in my opinion. Keep amber as low as possible, keep your spots as high as possible, and try not to flood out light in places where, you know, you're not going to need it. So, and also knowing that when it comes to rear lights, unless it's a reverse light, you're pretty much going to want to go with amber, because there's always going to be dust and debris and things behind you. And if you are rolling with a group, having that amber light also helps a little bit more on the eyes. And also, you can't see that well in the dark behind you in your mirrors, so you don't really need that premium light output. And that's in my opinion in terms of like color, you know. And so that, I think, pretty much wraps it up here, honestly. It's just honestly been a great surprise to go with the top name brands. I'm just not doing Baja Designs just because, in my opinion, they're a little bit more than what they're worth. But with Morimoto and Diode Dynamics, you know, those are kind of going to be my go-to forever now, as well as Procomp coming up in the game. It's pretty cool. They have a bunch of other like basic Chinese pods, but they're 5-inch and they're 7-inch combo, you know, whatever you would, they don't actually have a name for it. It's just like a part number. It's just called their 7-inch pod. But basically they're like, you know, higher brand or higher tier light pods with the higher output are really honestly performing really well. And so I have to see down the road when it comes to longevity and wear and tear and cracks and stuff like that, if it's actually going to be a worthy product or not, but super satisfied with it. So anyway, this is just kind of like the walk around the new lighting, and I have plans to actually get some overland trips coming in the wintertime. I've been working like crazy, like 70-hour weeks and doing tons of tours for the business, so really excited to actually get some time off, do some camping, and, you know, just seeing the scenery and the perfect weather out here, and no one's out here. I just honestly cannot wait for it. And so love the cold for that reason. Everybody's back down in Phoenix right now. So thanks guys, and I'll see you next time.
Morning sun in the east, over fields of gold. Dreams are born anew, hearts of steel unfold. America's tomorrow, we rise, we grow in unity. the time.